Hey everyone, it's Colin from Legalized Mischief Productions. Thank you for joining me and welcome. This is the first part of my step-by-step tutorial series on how to paint Leviathan Dreadnought. I'm really excited for this one. I love painting Leviathans. They're fantastic models. They have great shapes. They're beefy. They're intimidating. They're just a lot of fun to paint. So today what we're going to be doing is the airbrush base coat on the armor. And then from there, we're going to move to part 2, where we get out the brushes and we start doing metallics and detailing and things like that. So this is the Leviathan Dreadnought. This is a commission from my friend Carl, who's the host of the Independent Characters podcast. And he's added some embellishments here and a little back banner to make it just a little more Thousand Suns. And also he uses these Forge Fiend kind of plasma cannons in lieu of the standard just butcher cannon or whatever goes on a Leviathan, just to chaos it up a little bit more. This will give us a good opportunity to do some different textures and a little OSL, so that's really cool. I really enjoy painting the scheme for this army. It's a really bright, vibrant blue with some kind of old gold elements as well. So if you haven't seen pictures of Carl's army, you can check it out either on the Independent Characters Facebook page or on my Facebook page and my Instagram. It's a really, really bright blue color scheme. So really enjoy this one. And let's go over the paints that we'll be using. So base coat is Vallejo Model Air French Blue. It's a really vibrant royal blue. It's a great base coat. And then we're going to be using Scale 75 Amarth Blue, Scale 75 Hyrule Blue. I really like Hyrule Blue because there's a little bit of green in it, not a ton, but you can see it's a little bit different tone than the other blues. It's not just like a light blue. It has a little bit of green in there, and it gives a little bit more interest and plays off the red and the gold that we'll be doing. So just a great color, that Hyrule Blue. And then Vallejo Model Color White that we'll be mixing in the Hyrule Blue for the final highlight with the airbrush, and also the edge highlighting that we'll be doing. So today we're just gonna do the base coats on this guy. I'm gonna show you some different techniques using just kind of spray angles to minimize masking and make this go relatively quickly and get some really nice blends and where to put, shadows and highlights and all that. So when we're looking at the model, before we even start putting paint on it, we're going to start planning out what we're going to do. So for this model, for the blue, it's going to be all the armor, the helmet, everything's going to be blue. All the armor pieces, and then on these guns, these inset areas here are going to be blue as well. So we want to keep that in mind when we're airbrushing. The shadows, the shapes on these is really interesting because of just how curved they are. It makes it interesting to kind of play with the light and shadow. So what we're going to do is a little bit of panel modulation highlighting, and what that means is kind of exaggerating the highlights at the edges, towards the edges of the panels, and giving it just a really dramatic lighting. And you'll see what I mean as we go along. But basically, our highlights are going to be kind of the front here, top of that, top of the helmet, in here, and then the lower part of the hip armor is going to be our highlight, and then this kind of square area on top of the knee, and we're going to leave the bottom of the knee. There's a break right there you can see in the knee. We're going to leave the bottom of the knee dark, and then we're going to highlight the bottom portion of the leg armor, tops of the feet. And on the front here, it gets a little, on these big panels, it gets a little bit more a little trickier because we do want, you can see as I'm rotating the model, we do want the highlight to follow this line here. We want there to be a highlight there, but we're also going to be highlighting this sharp edge here to give it just a really dramatic lighting effect. So this is going to stay dark in the middle a little bit. This is going to be lighter. This is going to be lighter. And then the outside of these panels is going to be lighter. So we're not going to go in and just highlight the middle of the panel up to like here and then call it a highlight. We're going to do a little bit more work than that, and you'll see just how dramatic that lighting becomes. And then when we go down to the next panel, part of panel modulation is keeping highlights next to shadow to kind of accentuate the difference. So if we're doing high here, we have to start low here. I usually start low on panels like this anyway, and then work my way down to highlights. It reinforces that kind of, light reflects off the ground as well as coming down straight from above. So you're envisioning the light coming straight down. It'll make sense as we go along. So again, we're going to pull this highlight is going to continue onto this shoulder. This is going to be dark here. And the highlight is going to continue along the top of the shoulder. But this part here is going to be dark. And this is going to continue down into a highlight on the side. If we just do like a highlight just kind of all over this top area here, I mean, it'll look right, but it'll just be a little underwhelming. So we really want a dramatic light on that. For the back here, it's going to be dark going to light on the outside here, and then back to dark on the other side. And the same on this side. This we're going to leave for metallic work in here. This will probably be blue. This will probably be blue as well. And then all this down here in the legs is all metallics. We're going to do the bottom here like we would on a marine, the back of the leg. And that's partially to keep this, again, in shadow, elongate the model. So some of those same concepts that we're using when we're painting the Space Marines, we're going to transport over to this dreadnought, and then we're going to exaggerate it. But we want the focus of the model to be right here. No matter what's going on the rest of the model, we want the focus to be right in this area. So we're really going to punch up this area and then concentrate and make sure we nail these two panels, these two panels. So part of what keeping this dark, this line here, dark does, is it accentuates these highlights, and those highlights here draw the eye right into the helmet. It just pulls your eye down here right into the helmet, and that's where we want the focus to be, is right there, right in the center of the model and in the chest area. So the helmet, and then this will be silver, and this little embellishment will be gold. Then you have the guns and the little shield down here. The shield would be shaded as well and highlighted. So we are kind of planning it out. So we're gonna do all that base coating, and then we're gonna go in with a brush and we're gonna base coat all these metallics. That's gonna be in part 2, and that's where we're really gonna see this dreadnought start to come to life. So I'm excited. Let's get started. So a little bit of the French blue, and this is going to be an overall base coat. This is going to go on the whole model. And we want to make sure, as always, just to get a nice even base coat. And even though we're going for a very bright scheme at the end, we did prime this model black. I usually work off of black unless I'm doing white or yellow. because I do want to keep those shadows, and like I'm not able to get the airbrush really back in behind that hip armor plate. So even if I don't get the airbrush back there, it's still black. It still has a little bit of blue on it. Yeah, let's go ahead and do these blue as well. It still has a little bit of blue on it, but it's kind of a natural, like you can see under that hip plate, it has a little bit of blue on it, but it's mostly black. But that's fine. That's a natural shadow. If we had primed it white and we had missed spots like that, it would look very strange. It would be very light. We'd have to go in there with a brush and kind of put that dark blue base coat in there, and that is tedious and time consuming and doesn't quite look right. So keeping it black, we're gonna work these highlights up. Excuse me. We're gonna work these highlights up really high, just using paint. So the fact that we started from a black base coat isn't really going to affect the final highlights. It's gonna make this base coat a little bit darker. But what it's gonna do is it's gonna lock in our shadows and make just less work for us to get those shadows, because they're gonna occur naturally because of the black base coat. So saving time, saving energy, getting a good result, that's the name of the game right there. So one thing about doing Leviathans, you do want to, excuse me, a little hitch in the throat today. You do want to make sure to turn the model sideways and get inside these big panels here. If you just spray straight on, those are going to stay like pure black, and you definitely don't want that. So it's a little tricky getting on either side of that carapace inside there, but you want to make sure to do it because we do want those to be blue. So just a nice even base coat on these huge panels, and we'll be putting some transfers down on these big panels to break up those big areas of blue and just give it even more character and more interest. So on the side of there. So the object is to get a good base coat and then work it up, and then once we get up to the highlight, then we can kind of, if we have to, we can go back and kind of play around with the highlights and the shadows and everything, with just glazing in these other colors. But we want to keep it to this palette. We want to keep it to these colors. We don't want to get too crazy. We're going to let the model and let the sculpt do a lot of that work for us. And it really lends itself to that because of how well defined the armor panels are. And almost dropped it. And typically this is how I would leave the model if I had assembled. I didn't assemble this model, but if I had, I always leave the weapons off, obviously, for painting. But other than that, this is where I would leave that model with the shoulders and everything. Maybe if I were doing Ultramarines or something and I wanted those shoulders to be white, I would leave them off, just like I would like Space Marine shoulder pads. If I were going to paint Space Marines a different color, or if I were going to paint the armor a different color from the shoulder pad, I always leave the shoulder pads separate. It saves having to mask and fiddle around with that. So I do the same thing on Dreadnoughts in general and Leviathans, but because this is going to be blue, and we're going to get some of that color variation from the gold, but also from the transfers, which are going to be like basically gold and white, and then like the OSL on the guns and the green lenses and the helmet, and but most of this model is going to be blue, and that's it's just a really dramatic color scheme on a really dramatic model. So a lot of drama today in this paint job, but it's a great paint job. I'm having fun. These are so cool. Just the rule of cool alone is worth the price of admission on these guys. Looking back, I forgot to base coat the weapons, and that's always kind of a bummer when when you forget to do whole pieces like that, because I just left them off to the side and just forgot about them. So what we're going to do is we're going to base coat these with the Hyrule Blue, or excuse me, the Amarth Blue, which is our mid-tone, the Amarth. So what we'll do is we'll base coat these with the Amarth, and then when we go back at the end on the model, because guaranteed we're going to have to go back and glaze in some of those shadows with the magic blue again, what we'll do is we'll glaze in those shadows on top of the Amarth Blue for these guns. And that'll work. That'll work out just fine. So it's not ideal. Obviously, we'd rather have, base coated these properly. But I don't. This is already thinned and ready to go in the airbrush. I don't want to waste that paint by pouring it out, and I don't want to switch colors. I want to keep going, and I put a decent amount because I wanted to highlight the whole dreadnought with this color. So I put a decent amount of paint in the cup, and I don't want to pour it out. So we're just going to make an adjustment on the fly. Because really the Amarth is the mid-tone, so you're not going to see a ton of the Amarth Blue. It's going to be a lot of shadow and highlight. And we're going to remember that, we just have to remember the lighting, remember where these are going on the model. So there's going to be a pretty extreme kind of light to dark on these. So it'll end up working out. You'll just have to trust me. These are just going to look different for the next few steps until we come back and glaze in those shadows. But that's okay. That's something that happens, and there are ways to work around that without wasting time and wasting paint. So that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do with these guys. So put those off to the side in a more visible place this time than, over by my coffee cup. And we'll start with the dreadnought, and we'll just start kind of top of the feet. A little bit of these toes are large, so we do want to hit the side of the toe as well as the top, and make sure that we have a good base for our highlights, and then each successive layer that we do will be less and less. So kind of here. Ooh, that is spattering pretty good. But again, we're going to be glazing in those shadows, so that spatter isn't the end of the world. It's not ideal, but I'll show you how we mitigate that A little bit there, a little bit on the bottom, kind of 2/3 of that shield. Good consistency. It's just being a little temperamental. And then you want to make sure when you're doing these hips, you want to make sure that you get a highlight on the side, but we want to leave it dark in the middle of that hip panel. So again, coming back here, and you can see on the front how there's a little bit of stippling. It's not like full blown spatter, but it's enough that I'm not going to leave it because I want those transitions, I want those blends to be really smooth. Because we're not doing any weathering, so just a little bit on the inside of the leg, but we do want the inside of the leg to be predominantly that magic blue, and a little bit on the top of that hip armor, the vent, that vent, top of that hip armor. Oh, this thing's going a little, the brush is getting a little squirrely. That's okay, we just clean off the tip, kind of reset, take a deep breath. Again, side of the hip armor, just a little touch on those little boxes there where they kind of extend past the shoulders and the guns, and then vertically on the exhaust there, because that curvature, if we were to try to do like a horizontal highlight on that curvature, it would look really strange. It would be competing like in two different directions. So we do a vertical highlight on that exhaust cover in order to keep it kind of all moving in the same direction as the sculpt. So, and don't forget the top of the exhaust, and the highlight on the top of the exhaust encasement is going to follow the highlight, the vertical highlight. Very important. So now that we've started on the legs, and you'll notice I did the legs and I kind of worked my way around, and then I moved up. So a little bit down there, a little bit down there, and now that highlight on the outside, on the bottom, we're going to carry that around to there. Now when we're shooting, excuse me. Now when we're shooting, we want to angle it away from the brush. So my brush is over here, and I'm angling it away so that I can't see the front of the shoulder. And what that does is it gives me that break right there. Where if I tried to shoot it from this side, I would have gotten paint all over the front of that shoulder. But I want that really clean break because I'm going to be doing a different highlight on the front of the shoulder. So be thinking about which direction you're spraying, which direction the paint is going to go when you spray. So because if I come in from this angle, it's going to prevent me from getting paint on the front of that shoulder and leave me with a really crisp line. And that's what I want. I want that line. Because when we come over to the top, when we were planning out the highlights and the shadows on this model, we're putting a highlight right here, And that's going to continue onto that shoulder. So again, we're going to go, when we're painting, we're going to go this direction onto the front shoulder, and we're going to angle the model. If I get paint to come out of my airbrush, it'd be much more useful. And we're going to angle the model to hit that highlight on the shoulder. And what that's going to do is it gives me another clean line. So I didn't even have to mask that off. That looks good. So we're going to come up here. Now this is a little bit trickier, but we'll make sure we get that good highlight there. And again, we're going to turn the model, we're going to flip it, and we're going to come at this front because we want to highlight the bottom of this panel right here. That area right there. And we want that crisp line between that panel and the bottom of this panel. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn the model and we're going to come at it like this from the top down. And we're going to lay that light. And while we're there, we're going to do the other one. So when we turn this model around, boom, beautiful. We have that really crisp line. And we're going to do that a couple more times as we highlight this model. So it's a really good habit to get into. It's a really good thing to practice because it's going to come up a lot where you want to get those clean lines. You want to get that differentiation, but you don't want to spend hours and hours masking that stuff off. And then here we're going to do the bottom part of this panel. Again, that's that color modulation. And there's a little overspray into the shadow on the shoulder. You can see there and a little bit there, but that's fine. We're going to come back. We're going to glaze in those shadows. So turning the model back to the shoulder, we want to get the top area of this shoulder without getting a ton of paint in the shadow on the side of the shoulder. A little bit of overspray is okay. We can glaze over that. If we just painted it with the Amarth blue, the glaze isn't going to work as well. We're going to have to go back in with actual like paint and just paint it. And that's harder to do than just kind of glaze out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my thumb there, and you can see just the top of the shoulder there is really peeking through. And that did a pretty good job of masking off that panel. There's a little bit left, kind of right there. But that did a pretty good job. And we're going to do a sharp edge highlight there too. So that little bit, if you can tell, there's a little bit that's off from that top line on the shoulder. That's all right. We'll come back. That'll cover it with the edge highlight. I'm not worried about that. So then we're going to come here and again, spraying from this direction towards the outside of this outside panel. We're going to highlight the outside of that panel. And what that does is it prevents me, again, from getting paint on that top of that arm. Like if I had just gone straight down, on the outside of that top panel, I would have sprayed right here. And I would have killed that shadow, which we've been trying to preserve while doing the other highlights. So, but because I came at it from this direction, the excess paint flew over that shoulder and left that shadow there. And again, we're going to go back and we're going to accentuate that shadow. So there is a definite kind of ugly stage while you're doing this type of highlighting. If you overspray, or if you feel like the shadows aren't really what you need them to be, that's fine, because we can always come back. We can always come back and refine it, but we want to get the light established with the midtone before we move on to highlights. And you'll see when we go back and glaze, it's very, very thin. It's very subtle, but it has a profound effect on the final paint scheme. And one of the reasons I love painting Leviathan so much is playing with shapes like this. I mean, this is just fun. So again, we're going to go the bottom of the shoulder here, and we're not messing around with that because that's the weapon mount. So we're just ignoring that. We're going to glue something on top of it. So we're going to go bottom of the shoulder there, and then you can see we're leaving the edge of this top carapace blue, because that is a straight down kind of angle. We're leaving it dark blue rather. It's going to get a little overspray on it. It's going to be a little lighter than just like it's not in total shadow. It's going to be a little lighter. I'm just drying this off so that I can hand mask the top of this again. And this is really helpful because that curve right there, you can fit your thumb into that curve and get a really nice line you can see there. If that worked. I always love when that works. That just makes me happy. It saves me so much time with tape or, whatever. So this is made a little bit trickier with the back banner, but we're going to come in here and do the front 2/3 of this missile thing. That top of the helmet, top of the gorget. And if we turn it around, we can see that gave us a really nice dramatic light on all those elements, but it preserved the dark blue on the front and kept the front in shadow. That's exactly what we wanted. Then we go straight on this part of the gorget there, and a little bit below in that curved area below the vent. Spray it a little bit there, and kind of revisit the shield a little bit. So we can see we're starting to see like the legs look a little monotone. We're going to exaggerate those shadows when we come back with the glaze. And we missed that kind of armor panel there. And that armor panel there. So we're going to come back and we're going to accentuate all these shadows. But as far as the light goes, we are well on our way. And now we're going to move to the Hyrule Blue. And this is where you're really going to see the dramatic highlights start to show up. This stuff is really, really strong. I love this color. But I really like blue-green. I think it's a great color. I think it's underused in miniature painting. Blue-green and magenta are two of my favorite colors to paint. There aren't a lot of color schemes that lend themselves to blue, green, and magenta, but I did an AdMech army in that scheme. That was cool. So here we're going to make sure that we have good consistency, and you can see how much lighter that is. So then we're going to start doing a little bit more targeted highlights, top of the foot, the bottom of this panel, maybe the outside of that interior toe, top of the foot, side of the toe, side of the toe. And we're just doing the sides, so we're doing like the interior foot kind of toe, but we're not getting this Hyrule Blue into the interior panel. We're leaving it on the exterior panel. And outside of that toe's getting a lot of light, so outside of that one. And so when we're spraying these legs, we want to angle it a little bit so that when we're doing our highlight, kind of rotate it around. When we're doing our highlight, you can see we're not getting on that interior leg panel back there. We're leaving that just with the shadow in the mid. But we will do the outside of the toe because it extends so far from the body. But we're not doing the top because that's going to be in shadow. We're just doing the sides. And it's little things like that that lend a little bit more realism to the highlighting effect that we're doing here. A little bit there, a little bit on the hip armor, a little bit on the hip armor, a little bit there, a little on the side there, a little there, a little there. And I'm going to go back because I worry about forgetting things as you've already seen in this video. So I'm going to go back and do the same thing on the other elements so that I try not to forget. I try not to forget again, which would be tragic. So coming around the side, we're going to do the bottom of the leg there. Ooh. A little bit excited with the highlight there, but that's okay. Not the end of the world. Kind of even it out on the other side. And that's all right. We're not going to worry about that. That'll all work out as we glaze and highlight. A little bit at the bottom there, a little bit at the bottom there, a little bit on the bottom of the shield. And then for the knees, you can see that line at the bottom of the knees, it's like right there. That line there. We want to keep that. That's a really nice highlight to do. Excuse me again. And this is another kind of quick trick. If I don't have to get the tape out, I won't do it. It takes time. This wouldn't take that long for a couple pieces of tape. I mean, it'd be like 2 pieces of tape. But what we can do is we can get a piece of paper. I usually use index cards that I've cut up or business cards from old jobs. If you have those lying around, those are great for this. Anything, do not use plastic because plastic, the paint will stay wet on. You want to use paper because it'll soak up the paint. And we're just going to use this a couple times and kind of rotate it until we don't really feel comfortable using it anymore. But what we're going to do is we're going to lay the paper right on that line. We're going to do that highlight. Boop. Perfect. Done and done. And we're going to use it a little different. We're going to move it over on the paper a little bit. Done. 2 straight lines. Done and done. Happy with that. Took 2 seconds. And now this paper will soak up that little bit of paint and it'll dry. The back of the paper is still fine. So we'll just keep that off to the side to use as we go along. Get the bottom of this panel here. the bottom of that panel there. And then rotate the model again. And we're going to hit that front highlight again. Hit that front highlight again. That might have been a little too strong, but that's okay. I'm going to get that highlight on the ridge there and pull that highlight over. Again, angling the brush, pull that highlight over onto the shoulders. Yeah, this is looking good. Front of the gorget, top of that little curvy thing. Again, angling the model away from us. Angling it away. Angling down. Now we're starting to get some dramatic shading going on. Now we're starting to get a very solid looking. Now we're starting to really accentuate and starting to get an idea of the shapes on this model and what it's gonna end up looking like when we're done. And that's exciting. I like that part. So we're gonna go back on the back and we're gonna do this vertical. Come on. Ooh. Fighting the brush a little bit today, but that happens. And when I'm spraying off camera, I'm just spraying on the paper next to where I'm working to kind of clear a little paint, because I don't want to keep fighting it like while holding it on the model, and then all of a sudden the paint releases and I just spray a giant gob of paint on the model when I'm not expecting it. So I want to check and double check before I put the brush over the model and start pulling back on the trigger. So here again, that's dry, so we're going to put our thumb there like that. And we're not doing the whole shoulder. We're going to stop and we're going to leave a little bit of that mid-tone there. If I were ambidextrous, I'd do this with my left thumb and spray with my right, but I'm not. There we go. Another little highlight up there. And then, so we're good on those panels for now. And then we're going to get these and do a really sharp kind of top-down highlight, and then carry that a little bit over onto the side, because these are protruding a lot from the model. So really sharp top highlight, a little bit down the side, and those are done. And then we just want to go back, double check, make sure we got everything that we wanted to get. We could even do, that's good, that's good. So just a little check, just a little heat check on the there. You can see we get the nice shadow there. We have a little bit of shadow left, not a lot, because doing these successive highlights, we have a little bit of shadow left in the middle of that panel. So we'll just keep that in mind when we go back, that we want to readdress that. We want to glaze that in a little bit. And I'm looking forward to getting to that step, because I've asked you guys to keep the faith as we've gone successively lighter and lighter. So when we go back and we do that shadow glaze, that'll enhance the highlights as well. So you'll really see this thing come together. This thing is so cool. I'm having so much fun. I love these things. If I actually don't play Marines, and I don't have my own. I play Chaos. I have some Chaos Marines, but I don't have a Leviathan. I'm not really big on the shooting phase. I'm much more of a melee assault type player, so standing and shooting isn't the most fun way to play the game for me. So I tend to gravitate towards big scary things that can punch, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't have a Leviathan with close combat weapons. So this highlight is really light, and that's going to just be on the very, very top of the guns as that highest light. It's right in the middle, and we just lightened up the Hyrule Blue, that last highlight color. We just lightened it up a little bit with white. We don't need to do much because it is significantly lighter than like the shadow color. But again, because we're doing Thousand Suns because we're doing Chaos Space Marines, that kind of really dramatic shading and highlighting really works. It just accentuates. So we can do the paper trick again, or we can do the thumb trick and just do a little shot. And the thumb trick is pretty good. We're gonna edge highlight that as well. But you see we get really good definition on those knees now. And now that's really gonna give a nice, there we go. And this, okay, good consistency. Good consistency. Now, but this is going to be very, very limited. Very limited on the highlight on this. So we're going to concentrate kind of on the outer half on these front panels here. A little bit in the corner on those panels there. Just the very bottom of these. And the top of the gorget there. A little bit on the front of the helmet. Because this is punching it up kind of another degree here. So we're going to rotate the model. I'm going to shoot straight down on the front here and on the top of that crest. And when that dries, it'll chill out a little bit. It's not that white, but it is noticeably brighter. You can see there, it's noticeably brighter than the highlights around it. So you want to just be very careful with this. Because you can over highlight with this very easily. So you want to be judicious, you want to be a little sparing, but you see those nice spots on the shoulder? That's really good. Really happy with that. A little bit there, and again, that top highlight, rotate the model. That front edge. And then turn it and boom. Love it. Again, that'll chill out when it dries. It is lighter though. I mean, it is a light blue that we're painting here, but we want that dramatic transition is where we're going to get that more chaosy kind of feel. But I'd still have like dramatic lights and darks if I were doing, Ultramarines or Blood Angels or something like that. But it wouldn't be quite this extreme. I don't know, I feel like it gives it like a little bit of like a mystical kind of feel. where you have, you know, those really stark transitions. I think it's definitely more at home in a chaos scheme than in just kind of your bog standard Space Marines, because it is so dramatic. Like, it's just, you know, a little bit on the top of the missile launcher there. It's such a dramatic scheme. So that, let me see. Now that we've added all that white, it's kind of, sorry. Let's see if we can get more. See if we can just do. That's a little better. Because it's not, you can still see the dramatic, but it's not like white. Looks a little bit. And I'll be posting pictures of this too, but it is illustrative for the or illustrative. It does show nicely the kind of extremes for these highlights that we're doing. I just don't want you to come away with the impression that we're going from dark blue to like white. It is a very, very light blue, but that's what we want. So, mission accomplished. So now we're going to go back, and this is very thin with the magic blue. There is a lot of water. That's still too. So it was too thick, so I sprayed some of it out and added more water because we really want this. Yeah, that's good. Okay. Now is the fun / difficult part. So you can see that is very thin. Very, very thin on the magic blue glaze. And this is where we're going to put these shadows back. So we're going to start on the leg and very carefully and we want to get, but you can see now we're really starting to get that drama in this color scheme. So we want to get kind of the back of the toe there. Kind of put. Oops. Don't want that. And you saw where I kind of oversprayed there. Again, lick the finger, wipe it off. Put these shadows back because this was highlighted up too far. Because this is sitting so far underneath the carapace that it's not going to get a lot of light until you get down there. This hip armor was highlighted too far up, so we're going to go back and concentrating more towards the inside, the top right. If you're looking at this hip joint here, this hip armor plate here, we're looking more at the top right. Or the top inside, because we want that highlight to be towards the outside, lower outside portion of the armor. So the higher inside portion of the armor, we're going to glaze back down. And we got a little bit up on our highlight there, and that is not wiping off. So that's okay. We'll just have to fix that. And one thing that is nice is you can, with the airbrush, you can go back and forth. You don't want to do it. but you can go back and forth with these glazes and really just keep refining, keep refining, keep refining. I don't want to do that. I want to move on. I want to do brushwork, but you know, sometimes it's necessary. Like that little spot on the bottom of that armor panel, that's not gonna do. I'm not gonna leave that. But what we can do is maybe experiment and see what that looks like, and see if we like that. I don't love that. So we're gonna go back with a highlight and just kind of fix that. But that's fine. I should have been holding. I could have done a little bit. I was getting a little sloppy with my angles there. So that's okay. We'll go back and fix it. And for now, we're doing this in reverse. So now we're going to tilt the model backwards, and we're going to spray up at that underlying area there to glaze in that shadow and leave it with a very strong line between that shadow and light on the front of that dreadnought. So again, we're going to tip it up. And get that really nice, strong highlight and shadow. And now we're glazing in the bottom of the shoulders here, where we kind of had a little bit of spatter. And now, again, tilting this up, and if we hit the side of this up here, not a big deal. What we don't want to do is spray straight sideways and get the top. We don't want to do that. So we're going to tilt this up again and come at it from this side. And that gives us a really nice shadow and light. Really nice line right there. And that line is where we're going to edge highlight. So that's perfect. Get that shadow. Get a little bit on the inside there. A little bit on the inside there. That shadow. And this is starting to shape up. This is starting to come together. Inside of that little box there. Sensor box, or whatever that is, some future tech, and then just looking around. It's not enough. So we're gonna go back. Just hit it. Almost got into trouble there, but that's good. So you can see if I turn this sideways out of the light, you can see that a lot better. So that nice differentiation, that nice progression down to that really, really light blue. Super happy with that. And the same thing on this side, turn it sideways. And get that really nice border. So that can happen when you're doing really thin. We got a little bit on top there, but we were able to rub it off with the finger, thankfully. But even if we hadn't, because it's so thin, if you put too much paint, like what happened was too much of the paint got on the side here, and it jumped up on top of the panel. The air pushed it on top of that panel, which is not good. But we were able to rub it off, so it's not the end of the world either. And coming in here, we want to make sure to get the side of the gorget, because this is just up way too high. So we want to get the side of the gorget. We want to get these sides in here and get those back to dark blue, because we just want that highlight to be in the center. We don't want it to be the whole carapace. We want it to be in the center of the carapace. Now the helmet's a little trickier. But see, we got a little bit on the back of the helmet and coming up here. kind of deepening those shadows under the missile launcher, reglazing the back of the missile launcher to get a little bit more dramatic. And then this is where we really make our money on this shading, is coming back through here and very lightly glazing those. We don't want to go all the way to the end. We don't want to go all the way out. We want to leave a little bit on the edge there, and just like that. Actually, that was perfect. I'm super happy with that. That looks really good. And then come back in, glaze those shadows. And then that spatter was particularly bad, so it's nice to go back and be able to fix that without having to, do a bunch of repainting and stuff. And now we have some really dramatic lighting on this Leviathan Dreadnought. So that, I'm just gonna fix that real quick. So again, we'll give it a once over before we empty the cup. Let's get the sides of this again. Oh, we can do, again, on these hip, you see how light those hip panels are? I don't like that. So we're gonna glaze a lot of those because those are pretty sunk back in there. So we're gonna do a pretty good glaze on those hip panels and really dull those, really tone those down because those got a little too. Maybe kind of limit that a little bit more. And the nice thing about using paint that thin is you can kind of just, and it just leaves a little bit of color. That's beautiful. I like that a lot. Really happy with that. So now we're going to go in with that thin Hyrule Blue and fix a couple things that, and this isn't a glaze because we do want to cover, but it's not, it's somewhere between a glaze and just, paint that we use for the mid-tone. So like if we're looking here on, like it's not just painting on, like there is some fluidity to it. It's thinner than if it were just paint, but it's not a glaze. It's definitely, come on. So we are going to put our thumb at the bottom there and just gently bring that back. From that glaze. Nice. Perfect. And we can even go and kind of see if there are any other areas that we feel like would benefit from a little adjustment as we go around. I think maybe that shadow and light is a little too stark. So we can maybe do a quick shot there. That's maybe a little, and again, this is really thin. So the fact that we're going back over kind of the mid-tone isn't really a big deal because it's not, really. I want to be careful now because this thing is really being a little temperamental with me, and I don't want to destroy all this work that we've done. So very, very carefully. That's looking really good. That is looking good. Happy with that. And now we'll see what that glaze does on these weapons. Remember, we forgot to do the base coat on the plasma cannons on the arms. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go in. And remember, there was no magic glue to start with on these, but you can see now we have that nice transition all the way through. And then we want to be a little bit heavier. We want to be a little bit heavier with the glaze here because this is the inside of the gun. It's going next to the body, and you're never going to see it. Like the light just isn't going to penetrate that close to the body. So we get a really dramatic kind of dark to light on the top of these guns, and then it goes back down on the other side to dark. So that's going to look really good up next to the Dreadnought. So again, little glaze, and the fact that we forgot to base coat it doesn't even matter because now we have that transition. So if you find that you forgot a step, if it's a step that this specifically, if it's something you can go back and do later, just go back and do it later. Don't stop what you're doing and halt progress and, you know, waste time, waste paint. You can always come back and definitely due for cleaning. But I'll do that off camera. So after an hour of a little back and forth, we have successfully base coated our Leviathan Dreadnought and highlighted it. And the guns are done. And what we want to do is we want to do a quick check and just make sure that the lighting and everything works out. That looks really good. And it comes into the dark. All the dark and light are next to each other. The gun looks natural. And when we start doing like the gold and everything, it's going to break up, especially the metallics, because this is like a little garish right now. This is like, whoa, pretty intense as far as the lighting and everything goes. When we start to pick out, especially the steel metallics, and we start to just leave it on the armor panels, it'll accentuate everything, but it also just kind of brings the whole model down to earth a little bit. But as far as where the shadows and lights and how this thing is looking so far, this thing is looking fierce. I mean, this is really, I'm super happy with this. And then, so the next time when we come in and next portion of our tutorial and we come in and start blocking out all these metallics, you'll see how it really brings them all together, and then you really be able to see it start to take on some life. So I'm really looking forward to that, and hope you enjoyed this tutorial. And these kind of shadows and lights, where this is placement, this is for every Leviathan Dreadnought that you're going to paint. You can do like this to varying degrees of severity, right? So you don't necessarily have to do it this crazy as far as like, this is pretty dark compared to this highlight, but that's as far as where you want to put the lights and the shadows. This is a good template to use, I think. So I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, and we'll see you for round 2 metallics very shortly. Thanks.